Welcome into Inside LAFC podcast. Glad you could join us. I am Max Bretos, as always, joined by Steve Beitashour. And Mama told us there'd be shows like this. We knew there would be. I'm going to start with a bright spot, Beta. A lot of people were hoping that the first round of this playoff, round one, would be home and away. Well, if it was home and away, LAFC would be out. So best of three, the black and gold still have life. And we will talk about game three coming up on Friday night. Mark your calendars. It's 7:30 local time. It may have been listed at 8. So if you're coming to the stadium, 7:30, get your tickets. The team needs your support. Also want to tell you, Mo Edu will be joining us on the podcast. He has been covering LAFC pretty closely. We'll get his thoughts about that Vancouver game and game three as well. But Beta, we're not going to put, as my dad would say, some lipstick on a pig. That wasn't a fun watch on Sunday night, and we learned very quickly about LAFC's fate.
I love your positivity to spin that, right? About the 3-game series, which I'm a big fan of, by the way, right? There's
3 games.
MLS. There's some intriguing matchups. We got some shockers going on, but you are right. LAFC did not look the best this game in Vancouver. Vancouver came out swinging. They came out like they were on the ropes, and it was do or die, which it was for them. And, you know, they came out from the first minute and pretty much the whole game. They took it to LAFC. So hopefully a wake-up call. Now LAFC is on the ropes as well. It's do or die. And this is what you love. It's like the game sevens, right? Everyone talks about NBA finals, game sevens, or MLB game sevens. So exciting. I love it. So I can't wait for it.
The 2 biggest words in all of sports, game 7. In MLS Round One, the 2 biggest words are game 3.
Game 3. There we go.
I want to talk about the slow start in Vancouver because you hit it on the nail. Vancouver looked like a team that had their back against the wall, and LAFC was a team that didn't have their back on the wall and played like a team that had a get-out-of-jail-free card. Had a little wiggle room. And they did. There's no denying that. But when you see that in the way that this team is playing the Vancouver and the way they were able to come out and score in the 9th minute, it was a weird goal. And then they scored again, in the 13th minute. That just, took everything out of LAFC. And they were trying to play catch up. There were some nice moments, but it was never going to be. And Vancouver got out there. But what is it? I mean, how can you duplicate that as a player? We've seen athletes do it where you say, we know that we have this team down. Let's put them out while we can and not put off until tomorrow what you can do today.
If you look at the last game regular season that LAFC went to Vancouver, they talked about having a quick start, weathering the storm. And it was the same sentiment this game. Steve Beitashour said we need to have a fast start because Vancouver is a good team, right? Both teams went the same formation as the previous game. And so you knew there were going to be little tactical nuances and switches throughout the game and the shape and how Vancouver attacks. And if you watch the pregame show, Vancouver talked about trying to exploit the flanks specifically behind Oliveira in that 3-4-3, which they did. I think Oliveira is a fantastic player, but he struggles a little bit with defensive responsibilities. And Vancouver, man, they knew it was do or die. And as a former player, when you're in that position where like, hey, tomorrow we're done. Like, we're not practicing anymore. We're not going to come see each other. We're not going to train or play any more games. If we lose this game, you're going to come out with just everything, just full octane, 100 miles an hour. And Vancouver did that. They looked really good. They were entertaining. They were fun to watch. Usually how LAFC is. And so now I want to see what happens. Now I want to see what goes on in this third game. What does LAFC change? Something, player, personnel, formation. Now, how does Vancouver feel? Their backs aren't necessarily against the wall anymore. It's not just do or die for them. It's for both teams. So it's been a heck of a series. It's been fun. But yeah, that was an impressive start by the Whitecaps for sure.
And I want to just preface before we go on, and we'll look towards game 3, but I want to look at some of the themes in game 2 that LAFC need to learn from, to not repeat in game 3. But I wanted to also say, it was a tough day for LAFC. I haven't seen them defend this poorly since May. And, you get a mulligan for that. You're allowed a bad day. You hate to see it in the postseason, but LAFC has been so good defensively. They haven't given up 3 goals in a game since the earthquakes back in May. So they've been good. This was a day where not only they weren't at their best, but Vancouver, unfortunately for LAFC, the playoffs started and they flicked the switch. They got healthy. Their international players came back. And this is the best we have seen of Vancouver. Perfect timing. Mm-hmm. They thrashed Portland 5-0. Game 1 against LAFC, they were in it. They lost 2-1. And then so now they've won 2 playoff games. Vanni Sartini feels the pressure's off of him. He says, I get so much criticism for not winning playoff games. Well, I've just won 2. And he's put them in a good position. So I do want to say that about Vancouver. Just for argument's sake, what could LAFC done differently in those early minutes where Vancouver were getting numbers up, flooding the attacking third? They were taking advantage of the wide areas as well, getting numbers in the box, getting numbers where it was like 4 or 5 guys, and you're like, it's coming from everywhere. What could have LAFC done, do you think, better to quell that a little bit?
Yeah, I think first you have to look at the players, right? The intensity. It's a playoff match. And, whether that's switching some of the personnel and putting guys like Ilie and Edward Atuesta who have playoff experience and know what it takes, maybe putting in those guys, or maybe it is formation change. You're on the road. Vanni Sartini said he's coming out firing, right? He's sending more attacking personnel out there at home in front of his fans to really go for it. So maybe you go into a little bit of different formation. Maybe it's a 3-5-2. Maybe it's a 4-3-3, which we've seen all year that LAFC thrives in, just to get that protection out wide and deeper with 2 fullbacks rather than the 3 center backs and kind of fanning them out to kind of cover that width, right? It's a little bit of a back and forth, but maybe they could have done that. But again, hindsight is always 20/20. If LAFC kept the same formation and won, we wouldn't be saying that. It'd be a different story. So now going to home, I do expect some changes, right? Vancouver looked pretty good in that first game, even at LAFC. I don't think it was an easy game for LAFC. So we'll see if Steve Cherundolo changes some things or some personnel, but I'd imagine there are some changes coming.
We'll talk about those potential formations. You mentioned intensity, so let's talk about dialing up the intensity. And I was broadcasting Real Salt Lake and Minnesota. Minnesota knocked Real Salt Lake. I talked to Coach Pablo Mastroeni after game 1, and he said they were making hard tackles, they were pushing us around, and we didn't respond. And then they played better in the next game, but Minnesota had that upper hand. We saw that at LAFC. There was a couple times where some fouls should have been called. There was this big Andres Cubas challenge where no foul, where he dispossessed a Sergi. There was a rugby tackle by Ali Ahmed on Tim Tillman where he just dragged. There was moments like this.
Yeah.
But they're bad, but you know what's required. That intensity, you've got to give it back. And I think LAFC, part of it was they were in a game against this team they had to get the result. But even then, that's where you want to see those. Make those hard challenges. Make a big come in with a big tackle to to stem it. How do you get that mindset to know, like, we're playing here, but how do we ratchet it up intense-wise?
Yeah, again, playoffs, I always say playoffs are a different beast, right? The regular season, there's rotations, keeping guys healthy, international breaks. There's all these different things that go into it. And I say it's more difficult to win the league because you're the most consistent for a long period of time. Where playoffs, I still say you can get lucky and just be in good form during those 4 or 5 game stretches and win the playoffs. But the intensity level, you cannot compare the two. Regular season versus playoffs. The intensity level goes up tenfold. You have to come in every 50-50 flying, ready to just sacrifice everything. You can't take any plays off. You can't switch off because you don't know if that one moment in the span of 90 minutes will knock you out of the playoffs. And then there's no more tomorrow. Where in the regular season, you know what, guys, sorry, I made a mistake. I fell asleep on the back post on this goal. It's okay. We'll train tomorrow and the next day. We have a game next week. We'll make
that's life in MLS, isn't it?
It's gone in the playoffs. You're done. Pack your bags. Go to your trip to Cabo. See you next year. And so, again, as a former player, this is kind of the guys know it, right? You have that experience. But for maybe the guys that aren't used to it, that aren't used to playoffs, you better start reminding them that, hey, you're in MLS now. You need to crank it up. It wasn't good enough. Okay, yeah, we were on the road, but we're going home now in front of 3252 in front of our fans, and you got to show up and you got to show for the badge. So I hope that message is being across all the players, because it's always the first person that you need to blame. You got to look at yourself as a player. Like, man, I didn't do enough. No coaches, no tactics, no nothing. Got to look at yourself in the mirror first.
First MLS Cup playoff for Olivier Giroud, Hugo Lloris, Luis O'Brien, David Martinez. Second one for guys like Sergi Palencia who know what's up. But there is an edge that Vancouver has that. I think it's a very valid point. And LAFC, you can look, if they win game 3, they will not have to leave BMO Stadium. If they take care of business at home, they will make MLS Cup because of what they did in the regular season. But obviously this game 3 has changed because now the nerves, and we've got to see a different LAFC than the one we saw there. I also want to say that I saw the game Sunday night, and I was a little sleep deprived. So it was a long weekend. I hadn't slept a lot, long weekend work-wise. And it was, it was a hard watch. I rewatched the game, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed on a Monday. And I saw a more positive look, notwithstanding those first 15, 20 minutes. There was a couple good chances. There was that Bouanga chance one-on-one that Takaoka saves. If that goes in, it's a different game. There was the one that
second half,
and Atuesta hit it, and it was a great shot. 2 great top tier chances.
Yeah.
Vancouver had 3 goals, 2 shots on goal. So it wasn't like they were just crushing LAFC. So there's some misfortune there, all off the table for not getting the bad start, and obviously dialing up the intensity. Let's talk about the best formation. And we could see this 3-4-3 again. We've seen so many formations. And this is something Steve Cherundolo said. He goes, I can throw different formations at you. And you already touched on something, but he's openly said that, and we have seen it through the season. Horses for courses. What do you bring in? We have seen a 4-3-3. We have seen a 3-5-2 sort of, or 3-4-1-2. There's been a lot of looks, and they have the players that are in that level. They have some guys on the bench. Eduardo Atuesta was interesting too, because that's a guy our set pieces weren't great. We don't have a real set piece taker. Denny took it. That's not really his forte. Atuesta's a little better. But maybe there's a way you could do it. There's options here, I think, is safe to say. We don't know what's going to be used, and Steve, we trust. But even if they start with a formation and they move it to something different, there is, I think, some options. I think getting another defender, so the Whitecaps, because Fafa Picault looked like one of the best players in the league. He's a nice player, but he was getting in.
Right.
So maybe there's a way to tighten up that back line.
I'm like, since I retired, did Fafa Picault become like a DP or something? He looked incredible. I'm like, there's no way. Like, what's going on here? But shout out to Takaoka, because he had some incredible saves in that second half. I think the ones you were talking about, to keep the lead for the Whitecaps. Because LAFC came out 30 seconds in. Bouanga, one-on-one, he had to make a big save. And then, the one where Blackman almost got a red card. Man, Bouanga, if I'm his teammates, I'm like, go down, get the guy a red card. So there were some moments where, yes, it could have had a different result. But to answer your question, if it were me, I would change the formation. I'm not Steve Cherundolo. He's got his staff who's incredible, and they're going to talk about it and dissect the game more than you or I or anybody else could. And so they're going to see things. But I would like to see a formation that, from my time there in 18 and 19 to the years after that, the formation that I think LAFC suits best is a 4-3-3. I think we've seen it the most out of all the other formations. And I would like to see that. Specifically, I also would like to see maybe a Campos Palencia as the fullbacks, just to get a little bit deeper and wider service when they're up with Hollingshead. He's such a good aerial threat and good player up higher. He's kind of just an ace in the pocket. You never know what you're going to get on set pieces or when you're building the attack and you're higher up. But with Campos, I just think his service with that left foot, it's so cultured, man. He whips in the ball. It's beautiful. You have Giroud, who just thrives off of that type of service. Or Kai Kamara, bring him in, thrives off of that kind of service. Same with Palencia on the right side. But then on top of that, you have that protection defensively, right? You have the width, like I talked about, in the back line. And again, Fafa Pico should not be looking like that in this game coming up on Friday, right? But the main part of the 4-3-3 that I like the most is the three in the midfield, specifically an Ilie or Eder Atuesta. You have guys that know the league, that know Gold, that can just constantly surround him, create that web around Gold and Armstrong, another good player. The three midfielders for LAFC should be able to just suffocate those two players, because I think those two are the driving force for the Whitecaps. Other than that, I don't think there's much to them. I don't want to be disrespectful. They have a good team, but I think those two are the driving forces. Yeah, Vancouver. Yeah.
There's definitely a talent edge for LAFC. And we saw them when they had the two-man midfield against the Dynamo, a game they lost at home, and they came back with 3 and they were able to not allow the midfield to get flooded. And I think it's interesting because it's a chess match. This was the game where Vanny got to throw everything at LAFC, and now Steve Cherno gets to, pick his chess piece to see what he can do. The Atuesta goal I was going to mention, if that goes in, a minute later, you had that goal to Brian White, third goal. It was like right afterwards. So it was maybe there's some frustration there, but there was just like some odd bad, a little bad luck and just a little bit of ball watching. And you put it all together, it's going to be a difficult defeat for LAFC.
Yeah. No, I agree.
Okay, so we talk about the formation. I think when we talked about the formation, we're worried about how you can firm up the defense, the back line in the midfield. Getting the front three going, which in this case was Bogusz, Bouanga, and Olivier Giroud. Bouanga was pretty quiet. Then he started getting up late. It's hard to keep him quelled that much. He's just such a talent. Olivier Giroud, it just was a game where there was no service for him. I know many people are getting frustrated. There's still things that I think in the buildup he was getting better. This was a game where it felt like he took a step back. We'll see what it means for him. And Matty Bogusz was okay. There's ways to get them behind that back line. We know with transition, it's one thing. Obviously, falling behind early will help, but not falling behind early will help.
Yeah, not falling. Yeah.
But how do you get Bouanga back there and Bogusz, and if they can, to get Olivier Giroud or whomever else comes into the game? If Kike Olivera is an option or Kai Kamara is an option, how do we get that trio, if it is a 3-man trio, going?
Yeah. Look, I'm going to go with Bouanga, Giroud, and Bogusz. If those are your front three, I'm not worried about Bouanga, Bogusz. Again, those two, 1A, 1B, who's going to be MVP for the team? I think they've both been phenomenal. Giroud is the one that I'm a little worried because not that he relies on the service, but he thrives on the service, right? He's not one player that's just going to make something happen like Bogusz or Bouanga. But in a formation and at home where LAFC will have more of the ball in higher positions in the final third, he'll get those chances. So again, I think that will get the front three going, like you're saying. But individually, Bouanga, Bogusz, man, they can make things happen out of nowhere. Their dribbling, their speed, their strength, left foot, right foot, and scoring in so many different facets. With Giroud, it's more about the service, right? He's so clinical. But against the Whitecaps, we didn't see any service for him, and he was one player similar to, take this with a grain of salt, similar to Wando, where Wando wasn't going to make his own thing happen.
Did you just compare Giroud to Wando?
That's the leading goal scorer of all time.
I liked how you prefaced it.
For MLS. Take it with a grain of salt. But he needs a service, and then he will finish. But you got to get him the service. And so last game against the Whitecaps, we didn't see service for him. So for the fans that are getting upset, how come he's not scoring and this and that? It's like, well, he's got to get more service. And at home, he will get more service. And that's why I mentioned those outside backs as well, because those are another two players that will just serve in the ball. That's what he wants. So.
Yep. Well, let's get into this game 3. Again, Friday night. It is 7:30 local time. So again, it said 7:30. Available on MLS Season Pass on Apple TV. Very happy to announce that I will be on the broadcast with Brian Dunseth.
Yeah.
I'll be calling it down the line. I'll be calling it down the middle. But it is game 3, do or die for LAFC. This is, if they win this, there's an international break. And then you will have the conference semifinals on November 23rd, the weekend of November 23rd. You have the conference finals week after. And then it's a big layoff. So it could be LAFC's season ends Friday, or you get 2 more weeks in the season, which sounds great to all of us. If they do get there, we now know that they will host the Sounders. We'll have that conversation hopefully for another day. Sounders knocking out Houston Dynamo. We'll talk about the MLS Cup playoffs here in a moment. And this is really it. So we've kind of talked about it, but how do we approach it? It's going to be at home. They're going to be really lifted up here. I want to mention some of the quotes. I got to put my glasses on this that they said after the game, and this will kind of set up the table for what lies ahead. Aaron Long, he said, playoffs, you got to be 90 minutes ready to go. And then we got to take care of business on Friday at home. We know our fans are amazing, and we're going to do everything we can to bring a win at home, move on to the next round. Lewis O'Brien said, I just think personally we have to all look at ourselves in the mirror, and we know it wasn't good enough. We got to get it right for game 3. Steve Cherundolo echoed something similar. We have nothing and no one to blame but ourselves. We will look to correct those mistakes this week in training and try to finish out the series on Friday. So it's going to be nerve-wracking, but I think we touched on some things. You've got to come out intense from the kickoff, and you should, because now from what we're hearing, this is it. They know this incredible season could go thud if they don't get the results. So they know they have to, put everything on the line, everything. So if they tidy up defensively. And look, I would love to see an early goal, but as long as they don't concede and they take care of that defensive end, so I think they'll have something ready, LAFC will have a shot in this. It will get nervous, but you don't want to be chasing this game like you did at BC Place.
No, they're definitely going to come out do or die mentality, because it is. There's no just saying it. It is. Facts are facts. But then they're at home. LAFC always just performs in front of their fans, in front of the 3252. Something about the drums, the flares, the black and gold in the stands, the noise, the songs, it just lifts you up, lifts your spirits. You can run a little bit faster, a little bit longer, and you just love to play in front of your own fans like that. So I expect a very different mood and mentality from LAFC. And, if as long as no bad luck or crazy things happen. Again, I always think back of 2018 when I was with the club. We lost against Salt Lake. These guys had 2 shots on goal and 3 goals. It's like, what? It was the craziest thing. But something like that doesn't happen. They're going to come out. They're going to play much better. They're going to score a lot of goals, and I think they'll win. So that's just my feeling.
7 straight wins before this loss to Vancouver. Big games, winning the Open Cup, getting through the Leagues Cup, getting what you needed in Decision Day.
Yeah, Decision Day, number 1 seed. Yeah,
so they've been up against it. They've had pressure, and they have responded.
Mm-hmm.
And they are a better team. So, weird things can happen, I know. But I just can't think you take out those 13 minutes at the beginning, it was a pretty even game. If not, LAFC had the edge. It was just that bad start. So I think we can alleviate that. I'm curious to see, do you think Vancouver comes out with that intensity? They've got to be a little bit more pragmatic, no?
There were a lot of smiles, not cheering, but there was a lot of smiles, as they should be. They played well. But anytime I see that and the coach is all thrilled and hugging and shaking everybody, I'm like, that was your game you wanted. You got it. You're content, right? That's just my feeling. I don't think they're going to come out with the same intensity away from home.
Isn't it hard to do that? I mean, because they were at a 10, and most of the times they're at a 7 or 8. You can't be at a 10 all the time.
And you want to think, as a spectator, as a fan, whatever, why don't you just do it every time? Listen, human nature is human nature. Call it what it is. That's just what it is. Like, you can't replicate that. Something authentic and real, like that was authentic and real. You can't just tell them to do that again. Like that feeling that you get when you hear your fans roar, and it just lifts you up and it gives you that adrenaline. You can't just say it and do it. It's just something that happens naturally. It's a cool feeling, but that's just my guess of.
And they can't play that way because they did that. They took a big risk when you throw 6-7 guys up, because if LAFC turns it over and goes whoop, and Denny goes, they're down a goal. There's a lot of good fortune here. They got these balls caroming around, and they got the goals. I just can't imagine they're going to be that big of a risk taker this time around.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, I hope we picked up the confidence around here. But you said they think they go in. I think LAFC is going to win. I don't think it's going to be uncomfortable for a little bit, but they should get. I'm going to say 2-1, maybe 2-0.
I'm going to say 3-1. I'll say 3-1.
3-1. That's the scoreline. That is the scoreline. So I do want to. We'll wrap up here. Again, we have Mo Edu of Apple TV and CBS Sports Golazo and Fox Soccer joining us here in a moment. But MLS Cup Madness, and I don't know if this is going to give us any more confident, but
I don't think so.
We talked before the playoffs started, and we said, I think it's going to go chalk. I think the best teams are going to prove themselves. They have this format in their favor. God. Columbus knocked out in 2 games. Columbus, the second best record in MLS, out to the New York Red Bulls. Inter Miami, best record in MLS history. 13 saves for Brad Guzan, so they have a hot goalkeeper. And in game 2, they won it late. Didn't even go to penalties. So now Inter Miami's in the same shape. The 1 seed in the East, same shape as having to come up with a game at home against a team that's got nothing to lose. They're not supposed to be there. So it's going to be very interesting. And then there's 2 other game 3s, Charlotte and Orlando, Charlotte, and then Cincinnati, New York City FC. Everything in the West is determined. The 2-seeded Galaxy, who look really good. Just a reminder, if LAFC continues, we'll go back to decision day, because if they meet, it'll be at BMO Stadium. Seattle's through, and Minnesota United, the 6th seed, more madness, beat the 3 seed. What do you take away from what's happening around this league and these playoffs? I'm surprised.
Get your popcorn out. It is just pure excitement. You're at the edge of your seat.
What we wait for. These game 3s are going to be, for the neutrals, are going to be great. For everyone who's got a team, it's going to be nerve-wracking.
Yeah, it's going to be nerve-wracking, but it's just so exciting for any neutral. I'm watching other games as well, and I'm just like, this is great. I love this. I hate it as a player because you get so nervous. You really want to win, and for the club and for the fans. But as a spectator, I love this. This is great. Every game is just fireworks, and teams are going for it, and just shockers. Like, man, I think most people, you and I included, picked Columbus to be in the final, either Miami or Columbus. They're out. And then you got Miami over here on the ropes, not on the ropes, but, going into a do or die situation in game 3, so much LAFC, who is undoubtedly the best team on the West as well. So it's fun. It's exciting, but this is playoff soccer for you. This is what you love to see. Every game matters. Regular season, rotating players. None of that. Every single minute of every single game matters now. So it's pretty fun.
Upsets in sports always makes these tournaments better, whether it's the NCAA tournament, whether it's the NFL playoffs, certainly here. But let's just hope they don't have too many upsets in the case of Vancouver Whitecaps, maybe on the Eastern Conference, or maybe we just have that big one. But there we go. We're confident, but it's a crazy MLS Cup playoffs. Friday night for LAFC Vancouver, Saturday for the other games. Go to MLS Season Pass on Apple TV to enjoy all the splendor, as Beta pointed out. All right, man. Hopefully we'll be back. Good time podcast. I sense it coming up next week.
It will be. I got it.
Yes! Stamp it!
You feel it. I love it.
More Inside LAFC podcast. We will take a quick break. We'll be back with Mo Edu next.
Inside LAFC podcast is presented by Freeway Insurance. Driving savings.
Welcome back to Inside LAFC podcast, a man that people, the LAFC fan base, knows very well of Apple TV, MLS Season Pass. Also see him on CBS and Fox. Maurice Edu, Mo Edu, you've called both these games. Quick, let's start this conversation because we're going to try and fix this. You have a good look at it. You've done a lot of LAFC games this season. But just these two games overall, specifically that game 2 in Vancouver, what is the message for LAFC?
I would say, first of all, good to see you, my man.
Oh,
always
great to see you. Look, I'm just
always a pleasure
into it.
No, I would say, listen, from a LAFC standpoint, game 2 should be a wake-up call. It has to be a wake-up call. And there were even signs and hints of it a little bit in game 1. It was interesting to hear Hugo Lloris's comments after the game saying, that wasn't good enough. Although it's the playoff time now, and the most important thing is advancing to the next game and advancing to the next round. To hear Hugo Lloris, a player who's experienced, who's played in cup competitions, who's won a World Cup, so he knows how to navigate a tournament setting, for him to come out and say, like, this isn't good enough. If we want to be where we strive to be, which is lifting a trophy at the end of this, it has to be better. And game 2, maybe the warning signs that he was expressing and kind of alluding to expose themselves even more, because in game 2, Vancouver, for large parts of that game, it was men against boys. It was a team that seemed as though they had a fire lit under them. They had a point to prove. Obviously, playing from their home fan base for the last time that season probably inspired them even more. But I also look at game 1 and the way that one played out. And there were moments where Vancouver, although they didn't get the result, there were some positives that they could take away from that. And I think they took those positives from game 1, amplified them in game 2, came out a team that was very, very confident in the face of LAFC, didn't show any fear. Little luck on their side in certain moments, but that luck, I would also say, was created by them, and they got the result. So they'll come into game 3 incredibly confident, especially the way that this little rivalry, I guess we can call, has been brewing, and the thing that was lacking was them getting a victory. They finally had that victory, a pretty important victory for them as well. So from an LAFC standpoint, it has to be a wake-up call. That was one of the flattest, I guess, starts to a game that I've seen from LAFC in a while. And it came at probably the worst time, right? Coming in the playoffs, not the ideal time for that to happen. But the reality is LAFC will be back at home in front of their 3252, that fan base, which is incredible. A stadium where they know how to show up. They know how to turn things up. Their track record is incredible in that building. Steve Beitashour's track record as a manager in the postseason is incredible as well. So a lot to be played for in game 3. But again, game 2 has to be a wake-up call for LAFC.
It's an interesting matchup because LAFC, we talk about last year where they beat Vancouver twice in CONCACAF Champions Cup. They beat Vancouver twice in the playoff game. So everyone's thinking this is a favorable matchup. But the more you see it, it's not the best one for the black and gold. And to your point, that first game, there were some alarm bells, right? Even at the end of the game, there were some nervous moments for those that are watching in. We saw that there, maybe more specifically in game 2, where they looked like they were shot out of a cannon. I mean, what were those things that you saw? And I was listening to the broadcast, and you were like, I remember you were surprised at how they're getting numbers up. But what were some of those things they did that made LAFC uncomfortable that they might lean into again in a game 3, albeit it's going to be in LA? I imagine it changes, but those things that work for them.
Well, first and foremost, Vanni Sartini, credit to him. He rolled the dice and said, I'm going to put as many attacking players and players that I feel can deliver that final product in the final third on the pitch. Fafa Pico came into the game, and we thought that might be at the expense of Ali Ahmed, but actually, no. Ali Ahmed was on the pitch as well. Oh, Fafa was, just caused all kind of problems on that left-hand side, and it looked as though that was part of their game plan, because Ali Ahmed drifted more to that left-hand side, so himself and Fafa Pico, they really wreaked havoc on that side, targeting Kiki Oliveira, playing as a wing-back at times, and finding ways to change the point of attack to try to isolate Fafa, get him in 1v1 situations, because they know he's a player that is willing to just go 1v1. He won't shy away from that. But, you just look at the way that the goals came about. The first goal comes from Vancouver pressing LAFC high and then when they do win the ball back, the way that they got numbers into the box, Stuart Armstrong pushed higher up the pitch, Sebastian Berhalter their right wing back is all the way in the box. And one thing that probably didn't happen often enough in game one from a Vancouver standpoint was Ryan Gold playing higher and closer to Brian White. And this time he's in the 18 as well. So the counter press worked well for them. That's how they get their first goal. The second goal, the next two goals, LAFC will look back and think we could have done better, right? The second one is off of the second phase of a corner kick. No one gets pressure to the ball. Like, these are things that can be worked out in training that can be spotted and identified relatively easily. The third one is a throw-in where everyone just falls asleep. But to your question directly, what did Vancouver do well? First of all, I think they got the personnel right. They did a good job of changing the point of attack to create 1v1s in wide areas. They did a good job of shifting the two in midfield, utilizing their three in midfield versus the two of LAFC in midfield to create openings. And they just didn't show fear. There were a couple, I mean, again, you can say that a little bit of luck with the own goal, a little bit of luck with the two own goals, actually, but I don't call that luck. You put a dangerous ball into a dangerous area on two occasions. You have runners that are putting pressure on the back line. That's how you force own goals. That's how you force mistakes. But by and large, yeah, I just thought that they did a good job of getting the crowd into the game early on. The intensity, the energy of that game was evident from minute one, and they played like a team that was in a win or go home situation. LAFC, I thought, maybe were trying to ease their way into the game, and it wasn't really into the second half where you started to see Denny Bwanga get into 1v1 situations and get isolated in wide areas and get at center backs. And give credit to Takaoka. He made a couple massive saves that kept LAFC off the board. So by and large, I would say complete performance from Vancouver, because in game one, they played well defensively, but didn't really take their chances offensively or create enough. In this second game, they did that. And for LAFC, they never really kicked on or showed that level of urgency and I don't want to say desperation, but there's another gear that they can go to that we didn't see them go to often enough in that game, in the second game.
Well, there should be urgency now, because I guess that's the danger of a game two in this format, that LAFC, maybe it's just this mental game you play. If things go wrong, we do have a game three, and maybe it's hard to kind of recreate that desperation, for lack of a better word, or that urgency in that situation. But now they have no choice. So they have to, you hope to see it. I imagine you will see it, because it's going to be made abundantly clear. Do you think, as well as Vancouver played and the urgency they showed, they still are going to be urgent, but now they know they're facing a different team that's going to match that? Do you think we see similar traits from the game two in BC Place? Can they be a little bit more? Will they be a little more cautious, knowing that I know it's a hard one to answer, but it's one of those things for Vancouver. They kind of have LAFC on the ropes a bit playing this way. It's a risky way to play. You know, LAFC can get that transition going and make them pay very quickly. But how do you think Vancouver looks at how they approach game three?
Honestly, if I'm Vanni Sartini, I'm not straying too far from what we did in game two. Yeah. Now, I get the fact that you're at home, and so that home environment, there's certain elements of playing at home that you just can't replicate and are hard to describe, honestly, unless you are playing at a home game and you see that and you feel that. But again, I go back to game one as maybe the better comparison. In game one, Vancouver came out, and I thought they played with a level of personality and expressed themselves. They didn't shy away from playing against a juggernaut like LAFC in their building, right? And you think about the biggest chance, the first proper chance that comes in that game is the one that Brian White has, right? And he doesn't take it. If he scores that goal, I think it was like 7 minutes into the game or so. If he scores that goal, it's who knows what that result is, and who knows? Who knows, right?
Probably. We
don't know, because I mean, we can go to Leagues Cup where Vancouver scores 2, but LAFC scored 2 at the end at home. So we don't know, right? But my point is that in that first game, I wouldn't say that there was such a stark difference between how Vancouver played in game one versus game two, because in both games I felt like they didn't shy away. They didn't play like they were the 8 seed coming into this. They didn't play like it was an 8 versus 1. They played more like it was a 1 versus 4, 1 versus 5 type game where they felt like they deserved and like they earned the right to be in that game, and they deserve to be on the pitch against LAFC. And so, if I'm Vanny, listen, I'm telling my team, guys, this has been coming. Yeah, we've lost numerous games against LAFC consecutively, and every time we walked off the pitch, we thought, oh, we were in this game, or if the ball would have rolled here, if this centimeters different on this play, we would have had a result, and we finally get that result. So the level of confidence that group will be feeling right now is incredible. The other side of that coin, LAFC at home, Denny Bouanga and LAFC in the playoffs at home. It's a team that just knows how to get results. It's a team that knows how, when it's time to turn that knob and take it to another level, there's not many teams in this league that have that extra level that they can go to, right? You can talk about, you would say Miami, you would say probably Galaxy and maybe one other, Columbus, who have been knocked out, who have that next level that they can reach. And that's the scary part when you have a team like LAFC, because the level of talent, the level of ability amongst the individuals, before you even talk about the collective, is elite.
It's an interesting situation because the ball is certainly in LAFC's court, and I agree with you. We saw the tendencies, and I think Vancouver's going to come out in a similar fashion because, like you said, they did that in Game 1 away. Obviously, they do that in Game 2. So LAFC, and you mentioned this has been a big game club all season. When in the Open Cup, getting the win on decision day, getting to a Leagues Cup final, they know about this pressure and when to turn it on, and this is certainly one of those moments. How do they break this? How do they, if we anticipate Vancouver coming out in a similar way, how does LAFC respond in the right way to turn the tables here?
Well, first of all, you're playing at home, and one of the first things that we always spoke about when we in like my playing days, especially when you're at home, is you got to give the fans the reason to be in the building, right? So you got to come out and set the tone early, whether that's the first shot, the first tackle, the first challenge, the first foul. You set the tempo, you set the tone of that game early on, and that has to be evident amongst not just 5 players on your team. That has to be evident amongst the 11 on the pitch, the guys on the bench that are eager to come onto the pitch as well. LAFC have to win their individual duels. They have to be better defensively because some of the chances that they concede are self-inflicted. Losing the ball in silly areas, trying to play a pass that's picked off too easily. As much as LAFC is a team that's so good in transition, they can also be caught vulnerable in those same situations, which happen quite a bit against Vancouver, who is equally a good team in transition. So cutting out some of those individual errors, finding ways to get Denny Bouanga in more 1v1 situations, Bogusz and Kiki Oliveira finding that balance on the right-hand side. And then the biggest piece is LAFC have to figure out a way to involve Olivier Giroud more. Whether that means getting service in the box early, whether that means, finding him in the link-up play and in the build-up to plays. You go back to the Game 1, that second goal, the game-winning goal in that game, and his role that's in that build-up. Now he doesn't play the final pass. He doesn't score the goal. So some people might actually overlook Olivier Giroud's value in that play, but it's his role is so instrumental. We can walk through that play, and it starts with Bouanga staying wide. A ball is played into him, and now there's a passing lane into Giroud, who does well to hold off his defender, lays it off one time for Hollingshead coming inside. And so these are details that little football nerds like us, we dive into, we enjoy, because these are the intricacies that define and can shape a play that sometimes get overlooked. But Olivier Giroud is too good of a player, too good of a goal scorer, too good of an asset to this team for him to go missing in games, for him to be quiet in games, for these assets and skill sets to not be on full display consistently. So LAFC have to figure out a way to get him. And honestly, I said to get him involved more in the buildup, but if you're an LAFC fan, you could care less if he's getting involved in the buildup, as long as he's getting chances in the 18. And that's the biggest part. There has to be more chances created for him, whether it's off of balls being cut across the 18 for him to time his run to the near post, for balls in the air for him to score off of headers. However that looks, as and for LAFC fans, hopefully this journey continues through the playoff this season. That has to become more evident and more consistent, because you expect more from that position. You expect more goals from a man of his pedigree and of his quality. So I think that's one of the biggest things that has to be worked out, is how to get him more involved. Because on a day when Bouanga or Bogusz is quiet or not as effective or not getting the chances that they normally get, yeah, you would love to be able to rely on your number 9 to score you goals.
Giroud, I'm to no surprise getting the brunt of the criticism in many ways. But hearing you say that, look, if it's one thing if he's skying the ball over the crossbar or, hitting it straight to the goalkeeper with a great chance. We're not even seeing those chances. And I think that's an important, clarification to make, that the service has to get there. He knows what he's doing. He's going to get in positions. There's that responsibility, whether it's Bogusz, Bouanga, or the wide players, to find him they've struggled doing that, but to find him in a favorable spot, because I just want to see the chances. And I figure we might, but we haven't got to that point yet where he gets 2 or 3 a game. If he gets 2 or 3 a game, he's putting one of those away.
I agree with you. And the other part to that is, as soon as Giroud, obviously there's going to be respect attached to how teams defend against him because of who he is and his pedigree, right? So that goes without saying. But as soon as he starts getting chances, and like you said, whether he's putting one away or if he's at least just getting like 2 or 3 a game, well, now there's going to be even more respect attached to that. And there's going to be more bodies coming on to try to cut off passing lanes into him or slow him down. And what that does is that creates openings, that creates space for other players to now get 1v1s. That creates more opportunities for Danny Bouanga to be isolated on one side, or Bogusz, Kiki Oliveira to be isolated on the opposite side. But if you're defending against a player that is being starved of chances, being starved of service, you can take liberties at times, right? It's a gamble, obviously, but you can start to take liberties at times and say, okay, well, maybe we need to shift our focus to this area instead, because he's not even getting the ball. But I agree with you. It's maybe a little bit unfair and it's harsh criticism that Giroud has received, because it's not like he's getting 4 or 5 looks on goal a game and he's just blanking them and he's just whiffing the ball or misplacing headers. He's not getting many chances. He's been starved of service. And that's why I say it's more of, in my mindset, it's more of LAFC have to figure out a way to utilize him in a better way.
Yeah. And I'm not making excuses. He's got to find better windows to get open. All of that is in play here. We'll see how they can do it. We talked a little bit about formation, and all season we've seen LAFC go back and forth to their benefit. And Steve Cherundolo has openly said it. It's a nice thing to have horses for courses. I said that. He didn't say the horses for courses, but whatever works. So we saw the back 3 with the wing backs. Do you foresee any changes? Do you feel this is we'll see something similar in game 3?
My gut says we'll see the same formation, but if Murillo was fit, I honestly wouldn't mind seeing a 4-back again, because especially against
Murillo and Long as the centers.
Yeah. Sorry. So if Murillo's fit, I wouldn't mind seeing himself and Aaron Long back in a 4-back, and the reason I say that is because now you get an extra body in midfield, and so you're not just solely dependent on your attack coming in the wide areas. Now you can get a little bit more endeavor out of your number 8s. Now you have 2 number 8s who can be a little bit more advanced. Right now you're playing with 2 number 8s who are more so like 2 number 6s, 2 defensive midfielders in O'Brien and Tillman, who have to protect that back 3 at times to allow Oliveira to get forward, to allow Hollingshead to get forward at times. And they have to be really, really balanced. And as soon as that one ball splits them, or as soon as one gets cut out of position, well, now it's just like, it's frenzy type of defending. Whereas when you have 3 in midfield, you have your anchor. Let's say that anchor is Ilie, for example, and then in front of him is O'Brien and Tillman. Well, now you have 2 number 8s who can go and push higher up the pitch. You have another number 8 who can be another point of reference when you're in the attacking third, who can arrive in the box late to get chances, who can help to round out and balance out that attack, knowing that you always have that one pivot that's sitting a little bit deeper. So the way that Vancouver's played, especially that last game, they forced all the chances that LAFC created to come from wide areas. So if you can be a little bit more, I guess, diversified in your attack, and have a little bit more attacking bodies coming from the center of the park, I wouldn't mind seeing that. I wouldn't mind seeing a 4-3-3.
Murillo did get 15 minutes or so, which is not anything too minor. Will he be ready? And they went to this 3 in the back because Murillo was injured. I mean, with all things level, Murillo and Long were kind of that pairing. So it's a lot to absorb. That's something to keep an eye on as we get closer to game night, Friday night, 7:30, BMO Stadium. You can watch it on MLS Season Pass on Apple TV. Would you care to make a prediction, or what do you think? Well, LAFC, I think from what we were talking to Beta, and I feel like LAFC they won 7 in a row leading to this, and this is a team that's just more talented than Vancouver, and you figure they're going to get it right. This is not their first rodeo; they could do it. So I tend to think that LAFC should win, and maybe win maybe by a couple goals. I mean, famous last words here, but. There's too much talent for LAFC to see them go through anything. And I would also add, you had that horrible start in 15 minutes. After that, LAFC had good chances. They were getting some looks. You obviously can't start that way. And to your point as well, whoever scores first has a huge edge. But I mean, it's LAFC usually get their foot out in front on normal occasions. So how do you see it? You don't have to give a prediction, but how do you see it?
Yeah, no, listen, I for LAFC fans, all the all the fear that I put out there was just a reflection of the last couple of games. That being said, I think it's gonna be a hell of a game, if I'm being honest with you, because I would love to see Vancouver play with that same kind of courage and fearlessness and personality. I would love to see that. That being said, LAFC at home again. I go back to, and it's a lot of things that you said from a just talent standpoint. Yeah, I think they edge Vancouver across the board. Now there are some areas where you could say, "Oh, these guys have stood out." Like Ryan Gall's been a man amongst boys throughout the course of this playoff this season, and Fafa Pico played a blinder the last game. So did Andres Cubas. So from just a talent standpoint, yeah, LAFC are the better team. At home, LAFC are the better team. In playoffs, LAFC have shown to be the better team. So as much as I'm looking forward to seeing an incredible game and a shootout per se, it would be hard for me to bet against LAFC at home in a win or go home situation. Just given their track record, and then to lose the way that they lost that game, especially, that would have been a humbling moment for this group of players to lose 3-0 in the playoffs. That would have been a humbling experience for this group of players and a wake-up call. So I think they answered that call, and it's a hell of a game. But again, I'd probably lean towards LAFC in that matchup.
I would too. The only thing that gives me a little pause, it's been a very surprising playoff. Your view of what's happened, obviously Columbus out, second best record, better record than LAFC. Miami's going to a game 3 just like LAFC, so the 2-1 seeds. I thought coming in that the big boys would flex their muscles, but it's been almost the exact opposite. And we'll see what happens with the 1 seeds. But have you been surprised, or how? I think we're all been surprised, but how surprised have you been from what we have seen in these playoffs?
Yeah, it's been honestly the biggest surprise, of course, is Cincy. Is Columbus. Is Columbus going out and not going out in a 3-game series, going out in 2 games, being swept like that. That to me was the biggest surprise, just like everybody else. Because if I'm being honest, maybe it's disrespectful to the Red Bulls, Columbus is a better team. Columbus is a better team, but that's the beauty of this game. It's not won on paper. It's not won based on what you've done to get to this point. It's won based on what you do in the moment. And credit to Red Bulls. They showed up on 2 occasions, both on the road, which is quite the result because not many teams have gone into Columbus under Wilfred Nancy and picked up points there. So that was impressive. I would say, yeah, that surprised the hell out of me. Atlanta, as much as that's a surprise, man, the Benz is a crazy place. Mercedes-Benz Stadium is a crazy place. I've done too many games there, and I've witnessed too many goals scored in the dying moments of games to ever to ever check out of that game before the final whistle is blown. So, yeah, it's a surprise that, Messi hasn't scored a goal in that matchup so far. But that being said, Atlanta's got to go back to Miami and do that again. Miami at home, similar to LAFC at home. It's a different animal, a different beast. But I do give credit to Rob Valentino and Atlanta United because, in an interim role, he's found a way to get that team first and foremost into the playoffs. But then to beat your Supporters Shield champion, your record-setting Supporters Shield champions, that to me was impressive, and it leaves it all to be played for in that last game.
Yeah, Friday night, LAFC Vancouver, and then Saturday you have Orlando, Charlotte, Cincy, New York City, and then you have Inter and Atlanta. And look, I would say the gap between Red Bulls and Columbus was probably bigger than LAFC Vancouver because Vancouver was better than Red Bulls, and we could see that now. So a good lesson at the very least, Mo, for LAFC to say, look what happened to them. We can't be Columbus.
You can't take your foot off the gas for 1 second, man. You can't be. It's the playoffs, right? Every single ball that's rolled out there, every single kick of the ball has to be taken with a level of urgency and that this one moment could be the difference in a game. You literally have to approach it that way because that's how this game really plays out. It could just take 1 second for you to switch off. It could be a throw-in and you switch off, and now that just puts the game to bed, right? So every single second it matters in these games, and we've seen that so far throughout the playoffs, and I hope it continues that way.
All right, buckle up. Mo Edu, MLS Season Pass, Apple TV, joining us. Los Angelino as well. So we'll get ready, but I appreciate you, Mo, joining us. Great insight as always, and we will see you on the playoff trail moving forward.
Sounds good, my man. Appreciate it.
All right, Mo Edu, that's all the time we have for Inside LAFC podcast. We'll be back next week, rain or shine, to recap what happened with LAFC, hopefully with an eye up ahead as we head into the international break. For Mo Edu and Steve Beitashour, I am Max Bretos. Rate, review, download, subscribe, tell a friend. We'll see you next time.